committee. The usual full agenda today. As pops up on the screen, this will be recorded for the purposes of putting on the website and for transcription of minutes. I've got apologies from Natalie, and Joanne's here. Welcome, Joanne. See you. From Jim, and John's here. Welcome, John. We've got our minutes of the meeting on the 9th of October. As is the nature of the agendas for this committee, most of the business rolls forward on an ongoing basis, but are there any particular items in the minutes anyone wishes to raise, as it's no obvious place to hook it in today's agenda? I've not spotted anything like that. Or are there any matters of error or correction anyone wishes to raise? David.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Can I just say there's a table at the back of the minutes that summarises attendance at our meeting. I think that there are one or two errors on the table. Particularly, I noticed that Sarah, Jim and I are down on the table as not attending the last meeting when the minutes say correctly that we were there. So just somebody could just have a look at that table and check its accuracy. I think that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add, I'm not on that table, and I think I've not been on that table for a couple of meetings, although I have attended. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. We will get that right and retrospectively amend the minutes. Okay, if there's no other points, can I ask for approval of the minutes, please? Thank you very much. On the rolling action tracker, with one item around the workforce profiling and finance and so on, which we dealt with in our virtual meeting a couple of weeks ago, and now becomes part of the format for meetings such as this. So before we get into the specific agenda items, James, you're just going to set things off.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So lots to pick up on in the last month. We had a bit of a discussion at the informal chairs brief with myself and the chair a week or two ago. So I brought some of the NEDs up to speed with what's been happening with PwC and some of the recovery planning. So I just wanted to touch on some of that. We've also had our performance meeting with PwC and the regional ICB team yesterday. So I'll just give you a bit of feedback on that. And we're also going to propose that we slightly change the agenda today and start with Rob's report on the finance and the WTE and the people at the very headline level, because given the complexities of what we presented to you at the last board session on those forecasts, it probably makes sense to see the whole picture and then get into the sites to understand what's going on there rather than trying to build it up the other way around. So we thought we'd try that to make it a little bit clearer. So, excuse me, everybody. I mentioned in the informal briefing, but for the purpose of today's meeting, so everybody's clear and anyone who wasn't there, we have today month 6 position. We're feeding back on where we are on the month 6 papers. We're obviously talking about the risks and issues that we can see emerging through to month 7 when we get into individual site reports. We're clear on some of the main, the key risks around the beds and reprofiling of CIPs, because beds have obviously had to reopen given pressures. That the mid-case plan will probably deteriorate slightly as we go into month 7. We're doing a full review of all of the CIPs. That's been done actually by all of the sites. We expect some movement in a negative position because of obviously having to keep some of those beds open. But we also expect to see the mitigations on those. And as I said the other day, there are still mitigations to those bed openings, such as further reduction of non-criteria to reside, but also winter funding allocation that we've been negotiating as well, which we're going to come on to later today. What we're then doing is working with PwC and David Morris and his team, excuse me, to bring together the recovery actions that then create a sort of final forecast. And this is particularly important because, and came up in our, as the outcome of our PRM meeting yesterday, which is our performance review, that effectively we know now that there are a set of risks around winter, a set of risks around beds. We've then got PwC coming in as a strategic partner, looking at our CIPs, offering a judgment on whether or not they're robust enough and whether they think they'll deliver. We need to take all of that into a reforecast of the total plan that says the mid case was 36 million risk. Has it got worse? Probably slightly. What is that number, do we think? Where's our judgment on that with the work we've done with the sites and PwC? And then what are the recovery actions that then bring it back up? And where does that back up get us to? Does it still get us to balanced position, or does it still get us to somewhere short of that? And of course, that's the answer everybody wants, not least us in the room. The reality of getting to that answer is that a 2 week, it will take us 2 weeks from now, we think, to have the full range of analyses on the red, amber, greens, CIPs, PwC's actions, ripping control actions into the revised forecast. And PwC are saying it will take up to 4 weeks maximum to have the complete view of all of the recovery actions that they think are doable within the year, properly tested. So in our performance meeting with PwC and the regional team yesterday, we've agreed 2 actions, and one is that within 2 weeks, or by the end of 2 weeks, we'll be able to present the here's where we think that mid case, best case now is, on the back of current position, current understood risks, current views on winter, current views on income, and so on. And then PwC will help us with then the build back of that within the 4 weeks. So it's a sort of indicative position 2 weeks from now as to how real we think the position is, and then a final forecast 4 weeks from now, which is the stick to it and hit it forecast, whatever it is. So now, if you look at it that way, and then we had some of this in our meeting yesterday, it sort of sounds like, well, we don't really know where we are then, which isn't the case. We've got now our financial recovery board in place as part of our turnaround actions with PwC, and we had the first of those new formatted ones on Tuesday. I chair that meeting alongside the PwC recovery team, Rob, and we went through with every site exactly where their CIPs are, exactly what's deteriorated, what mitigating actions they're taking to improve. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that's not in place. It is. It's the aggregation of everybody's view, so we don't end up with a forecast that then PwC say 2 weeks later we've got a different number. So that's the key, is to get PwC, region, ICB and us all aligned on the reforecast position within that 4 week period. So that's the actions we got out of yesterday. Now, the other thing it's worth saying is we're really concerned, and were yesterday, that without certainty on some things that we think are easy, pretty easy to resolve, we can't get to even that first milestone in 2 weeks of the actual position, because we've still got risks in our position around things like income that the ICB have spent 7 months discussing, but no certainty. And the overperformance on income is a key part of that. At the meeting yesterday, we sort of raised this as there's 12 million of risk here. That's in an assumption in our forecast. If the ICB are going to say, we didn't want you to do that income, but we didn't tell you to stop, and haven't issued any notice for you to stop that income, which seems pretty simple. There was I won't go into the detail of it, but there was a long discussion about that yesterday. The outcome was that the answer to that question needs to be by Friday. So they've set a 2-day deadline for the ICB to say, if you are not going to pay the trust for income that she's owed from activity that it's undertaken, that you've not issued a performance or contractual amendment to say stop doing that activity, then you need to say why by Friday. The second one was the legal claim, which everybody knows about. Rob was very clear yesterday, as we all were. The treatment of that and how that's factored through this year's plan was signed off in the contract, was signed off in the plan, was signed off by NHSE and was signed off by the ICB. And yesterday the ICB informed us that they'd quite like to not do it like that. So we were very clear that can't happen either. And that's for them to put that in writing and articulate the reasons why they think they don't have to stick to the contract and the signed contractual agreements that we've got, because we don't believe there are any reasons for that. So those 2 things, very material, as you know, to our plan, in some dispute, dragging on now for weeks or months in the income case. We've asked for resolution. So we should have by the end of the week, clarity on those two things. And they're very clear that we can't do the sort of 2-week ask of the clear forecast unless we got them. The other thing to note is that we've now received an invitation for a mid-year review, which we've already had a mid-year review 2 weeks ago with Region. Now received an invitation to one with Jim Mackey on Wednesday. Now, no further information on this at all. I am meeting with the regional director briefly today and to hopefully get some more info, but that's next Wednesday. So knowing that, again, it was helpful yesterday to say, look, how can we have a meeting talking about where we're going to land this year without clarity or certainty on things like income at month 7? So extra sort of pressure on everybody to get themselves organised this week and give us a clear view. The things around that we'll get into later around the risks and the pressures as we go through the sites. You'll be unsurprised to hear about sort of winter pressures and beds, but also very pleased to report that from the data I've seen this morning, statistically, we're at the lowest non-criteria to reside position we've ever been across all the sites, actually. Now, it's still higher than we would like it to be, but what we're seeing is statistical reductions across all the sites. So Broad Green, Aintree and the Royal are all at the lowest statistical position they've been with a step change. We're clear what it would take at each site to get to a number low enough to not materialise the bed pressure. And the conversations about winter plans are ongoing, but so far, the additional 3 million that we know that we need, that we discussed at the last ARC, there's a sort of route to seeing at least 1.5 of that with commissioners at the moment on sort of rediverting other funds from other places. So there's a number of mitigations still in play around the winter plan, but I'll cover some of that when we discuss the winter plan later on. And obviously the sites will walk through all of their risks. So quite a bit in that, I know. The only other thing to signal was we've obviously got, and again, apologies to everybody for a late, short board meeting or a last minute short board meeting, but we're under real pressure to agree the PwC commission, and obviously they are working with us without a contract in place at the moment. So we've got a short meeting later on to discuss that. It's obviously not our business, but it's a board approval required, or at least a board direction required later. So I'll stop there, Chair. They're the key issues. I think Rob will set the scene across the trusts, and then we'll get into the individual sites, risks and issues.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Thanks, David, James. So I've got a presentation. Again, apologies, it should have gone round last night, but went round this morning. There's a lot of information in it, but I'll canter through it because as James has said, I think the key thing is with the sites and the financial forecast, workforce plan aligned, and the risks and mitigations that we are considering. So I don't know whether is Sarah able to share, or I'll share from my end. I just can't see anyone when that happens.
Probably better.
Not for everyone. Can you see that?
Yeah, got it, Rob.
Okay, great.
Can you make it full screen, Rob?
Yeah, I'll try that.
Okay.
Has that worked?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a lot of information in here. I've included, I'll give the update on UHLG and Liverpool Heart and Chest. The reason they're separated, because at month 6, remember, that we're reporting on, they weren't grouped up. So month 7, we'll try and bring everything, make even bigger slides, or get everything onto in a consistent basis, but they're separated today. I have included the financial plan recovery meeting, the actions update, so everyone's aware of what we were asked to do in previous meeting and what we did and talked about yesterday. We had another inquiry. We had Simon Worthington review us around about 6 weeks ago. He had made some recommendations, and there's an update on where we are with those. They're fairly consistent. We also had another part of PwC do an NHSE do a grip and control review, and we got a whole load of recommendations out of that following up from the I&I. That's included and we've got a way forward on that and allocated SROs and exec leads. So we'll be moving forward on that, and that's included. And then just to mention the financial recovery plan that James has talked about. So there's an awful lot to go through, but I think some of it I'll just point you towards, and obviously can take any questions as we go forward. So in terms of University Hospital Liverpool Group at month 6, so Loughton Liverpool Women's, the good news is that both organisations are on plan, with the exception of the deficit support funding that you'll recall it was is being withheld by NHSE for Q2 and Q3 proposed because of the system fragility or lack of competence in delivering the plan. So it's not specific to Loughton Liverpool Women's, but we are recipients. So that's £11.1 million withheld for Luft per quarter for Q2, and 3.8 million for Liverpool Women's. With the exception of that, our trading is on track. CIP is ahead in both organisations. 50 million delivered in Luft, with a 75 million in year position forecasted effect. So that's good. 7.6 million ahead of plan. 5.7 million at the women's, with a 10 million in year effect. 700,000 ahead of plan. So, and recurrently 51 million transacted, and 7 million at Liverpool Women. So good position at month 6, but we know that they are backed up in both organisations by use of balance sheet and one-off activities. So I'll come on to it. The underlying position remains a concern. The other point just to know is cash at the end of month 6. Luft was down to 5.5 million, which is just over 1 day's worth of cash. That is driven by the withholding of the deficit support funding, and similarly at Liverpool Women's, we're at 3.3 million, which is 7 days cash. This is making us apply for distress cash funding, which is just another route to the same people, but is particularly arduous. But we did receive 13.8 million in October for Luft, and 2.5 million for Liverpool Women's, which is good. We've reapplied in December for some more money. In the run rate terms, I'm not going to dwell on this, but just to note, based on the average plan that we require, you can see that Luft is 4.3 million away where we need to be, and the main driver there is pay, as we've talked about many times. It is being offset by income, but as James has mentioned, those discussions are ongoing about overperformance and activity management. We are very convinced that we will be paid for what we've done, but if they need to then reduce our activity going forward, that would have a massive effect. Liverpool Women's largely is on plan on run rate. This is our month 6 best case, worst mid case, and downside case. And you can see, as we've talked about many times, 36 million at shortfall at Luft, 1.1 million shortfall mid case at Liverpool Women's, and you can see a range there. But as James has mentioned, we are reviewing that in light of what's actually happening now with beds and the mitigations with PwC. So that will change and be refreshed in month 7, but hopefully this is a format that's useful, and it's monthly aligned. We talked about, and James showed this, what we were going to do on the workforce, and we've gone back to source documentation actually, so we've got an accurate plan. We've got the best case, mid case, downside position, which actually now says will be around about 400 whole-time equivalents away from where our plan would be or should have been at the end of the year. If you add in extra items such as funded posts and TUPE that has come online or is going to be coming online. So we've got a really accurate way of doing this now. The sites have got the same format, but again, this will change in month 7. So whilst we've got the methodology, it's set up, we've done it for month 6. I think the real key point will be month 7. So for review. And each of the sites, has got that now. So we'll talk about that. But again, focus on the risks and mitigations, I assume. This is the mid-case forecast. That's just the methodology. It's the Simon Worthington NHSE methodology. It takes run rate and adds in impacts for the second half of the year or however long is required. And that's what gets us to the 36 million or the 1.1 million. They're the range of forecasts that we report, and you'll see in the finance report. This is the risk analysis that we do, and you remember we triangulate that. So we look at the CIP risk based on the NHSE formulaic approach, but are now looking at blue and green schemes, which says in Luft there's around about a 21 million gap, but that might change. We extrapolate forward, that says there's about a 30 million gap, and the most accurate method, or the most accurate methodology, or most precise methodology is Simon Worthington using run rate, and that's what comes up with the 36 million. So from a risk perspective, it all aligns. Liverpool Women's does the same, and their risk is between 500,000 and 1.2 million. Just to highlight underlying deficit as well, because that's obviously absolutely crucial to us going into planning. Our mid-case now says if we miss plan by the mid-case projection, at Luft we'd be at 116 million underlying deficit. At Liverpool Women's would be at 34 million. And the range is quite significant because in our best case, we are projecting things like commercial activities and the impact of PwC interventions that we assume and will need to be recurrent, and that would shift the dial quite considerably. So we're really got a lot banking on trying to get as close to best case as we can. But that's the position. Not going to go through the summary in detail, just to say, so month 6, actually a good position, but we know it's underpinned by a lot of technical balance sheet releases that we can't do again, although we'll try and find everything we can. The key drivers of the issue in Luft are pay. And that's where we need to put a lot of the PwC, and are putting a lot of the PwC focus. Mitigations, obviously, to deliver the CIPs we know about, work with PwC, identify new opportunities, continue on the hard to do actions. I've got a lot of scrutiny on that yesterday. Commercial acceleration, really, really important to us in Q4. And this thing that we've been trying to do for the last 2 or 3 months is confirming the commissioner intentions, and looks like we're getting a little bit closer. The risks are noted there, but of course industrial action is coming up, and winter capacity required. Liverpool Women's, again, largely the same, except that the risk there is more on the income side or year to date, but actually there's a plan to recover that, and I think nothing more to note there. So I could pause there, David, James, or I could just touch on the Liverpool Heart and Chest. I'll do that very, very quickly. Liverpool Heart and Chest is on plan, is on forecast to deliver plan, and run rate is on plan as well at the end of the year. So really strong financial position. We are being asked to go further and faster, and there is a balance sheet review pending with PwC and NHSE relating to that, and we've got all the same information. The underlying position I had to change this slide to say underlying surplus, which was nice. Underlying surplus is 3.2 million. So that's, and again, obviously we'll be looking to maximise that going forward. So I can't see anyone, but do you want me to continue on just very quickly, and then I'll hand over to the sites, David?
Rob, on the FPRM actions from yesterday,
Yeah,
largely they're largely what I've just described earlier anyway.
yeah, they are. We're on track.
There's a lot on the slides for people to see.
Yeah,
so.
Basically, we've done everything that we said we would do. So we had things like responding to the grip and control, updating on the VAT return, discussions with the HMRC, doing everything, submitting information to the ICB. The things that are in amber effectively relate to the income and the risk around the 12 million income that you talked about. We're still awaiting the findings of the PwC review of our balance sheet, where we said we would hope that they quoted a very large numbers in our meeting forums. We said that would be a surprise to us, but we'd gratefully take it. That's in our conversations with them. They're not significant. The 2 to 6 million is what they've said, and we've got 2 million in the forecast still to come, but we wait the report. We still continue to push on 100% identification, fully worked up of CIPs. So we've not done that, but to the same degree, we're having to do the CIPs much more robustly, and that's so there's a goal to get to 100%, but 100% in the right way. So we're not quite there yet. And then the remaining items are Stephen Hay, just to confirm on the business case support. Stephen's been on holiday over the last few weeks, and then the ICB accounting treatment of the legal claim. So they're the oranges. The other for Liverpool Women's, all the items have been done, and for Liverpool Heart and Chest, again, just a small gap on the CIP that will be hopefully corrected in the next days and weeks. That's the FPRM update. The Simon Worthington review, you can see there were 6 recommendations. Again, first, all of are in progress or have been done. The activity on ERF, that was his number 1 recommendation. It's not for the lack of trying, but hopefully that will be resolved this week. We've got the forecast methodology that we use. We ran a NHS Impact QI improvement event with on workforce, which was illuminating, and we need to incorporate that going forward, but we've done that action. We've obviously engaged with PwC on a turnaround plan. The legal claims, the other amber, again, just clarity from the ICB. So it's out, we're clear, but ICB need to write that down. And then our ongoing work on the CIPs, which again, we're using his methodology. So Simon Worthington review, I think the things in our control we've done. The grip and control recommendations, again, I've included the details. I think the important point here is we've got SROs, exec SROs nominated for all the key areas where there's work to be done, and the plans and the ways to address the recommendations are due back this week. We've got a tracker that we're going to follow all the recommendations through on. We'll look at that oversight at FRB, but we're suggesting that audit committee, as it's done previously, reviews the evidence. So we've got real assurance there. So you can see that everything's set up, but we're waiting to enact that. And then the financial recovery plan, just to note that PwC are on site. We've got the weekly FRB stood up. James is chairing that with all execs and relevant SROs. There was initial 6 work streams that we're looking at. The key one is workforce, but there are other priorities following their 2-week diagnostic where they've looked at grip control methodologies, divisions and site recovery plans, and so there might be some added focus or specifics that they come up with alongside us as a strategic partner over the next week or so. And I think that is where we're at. There's a load of appendices with loads of information. I appreciate that. If anyone has further, when they review the information before board, if they want to give me a call, obviously I'll happy to go through anything. I'll come off sharing now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rob. James.
Thanks, Rob. So for Ned, that might have felt like a tidal wave of information all landing on you at once, but hopefully they're all things that we've discussed in individual isolation as we've gone through the last 6 or 7 months. Now, there's no expectation for everybody to have digested and be fully appraised of all of those. They're moving so fast that reviews are landing weekly. Rob is getting asked by, as you can see, so many different parties are taking a view on different parts of what we're doing. This is the first time today, I think, that we've managed to get all of those things and the feedback from all of those things together in one place. Some of them have only happened in the last week or 2. The only outstanding issue that would add to that pack, I think, is probably the finalisation of the balance sheet reviews, because they're still doing those and they've got to, again, David asked the question yesterday about, there was talk at one point on the Luff balance sheet of a significant number they felt was there. That number has shrunk considerably to be almost identical to the one Rob told them was there. So I think we're not going to get any major surprises in that. What we're trying to do, and there's no expectation for Neds or board members today to have digested that pack when we're still pulling it together live. David and I are meeting tomorrow. We need to have a conversation about how we're going to manage the next 4 weeks to get to a board agreed forecast that is the final position. Everybody's taken a view. What's the final forecast now, based on all of those reviews, all of those opportunities, all of those inputs from PwC, etc., etc. Execs are turning the handle on that daily, and we're getting closer and closer to it. Now, I'm also very conscious that we can't just keep throwing extra board meetings in every day. And the problem with these reviews is every one of them says, has your board considered? Has your board done this? Has your board done that? And literally, we'd have to meet daily, I think, to satisfy the asks of what the board has visibility of. So what we're trying to do here is get this pack plus the sort of balance sheet reviews all in one place, give people time to digest it, and then David and I will consider tomorrow with his steer about what the best way is then for the board to take a view in 2 weeks on the right. This is broadly where we think we are in terms of our risk review. And in another 2 weeks, this is where PwC say we can get to, and we need to bring the PwC team in front of the board so they can be challenged and probed on that, as well as execs. And then we need, as part of that, I think, a real challenge session of all of that information now in one place. Have we got assurance that we're doing the things we need to do? Is the triangulation between all of the reviews telling us that we're focusing on the right things? And is there anything else we could do that we're not doing? So wherever possible, we need to do that with an existing board governance rather than setting up extra meetings. So we'll look at how best to do it. But hopefully what you'll have now, rather than a sort of on the morning, here's 50 pages, the pack Rob shared with the addition of just the balance sheet review should be everything we really need. And then PwC should come and then present us their bridge from, or our bridge with their support from the new mid case to the new best case. And then we got some decisions to make as a board. So I'm sorry it feels like a lot of information all coming at the same time, but that's because it is. But I think now we're in a good position over this next 2 to 4 weeks to really get some considered time together for the board to see this stuff, challenge the appropriate people, and then come up with a final forecast, which is what we need to do. So I suggest we will obviously try and plan that as best as we can tomorrow, and let people know next week what that looks like over the next 4 weeks. But I think the sites probably is the area for focus today around the mitigations to some of those issues for the future.
Thank you. I'll come to Mike first.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Rob. Really helpful to have it laid out so clearly and so in such an integrated way, and I realise it's a moving piece. I just wanted to flag up one concern about the narrative, which is income's unclear, CIP good performance but still challenging. We've made some balance sheet adjustments to try and secure the in-year position and other things. But then we're saying if the reason that we're off track is DFR, and it's pretty straightforward for an external reader to say, no, the other reason you're off track is pay. And there's a line within the papers that say WTE is paying, showing minimal change in the year. And I just worry that if we have a narrative that says the only reason is DFR and we don't factor pay in, it looks like we are saying all of this is out of our control. And I think it's a complex position, and I realise the complexity, but I think we've got to hold a more complex narrative than it's just DFR. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, James.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that, Mike. And just for clarity, if you look at the recovery actions really to get to the best case, so a lot of our sort of move from mid to best is non-recurrent input, isn't it? In terms of things like we've discussed already, some of the legal claim stuff and others, and the HMRC claim. So we're very, very clear that the underlying run rate and the exit run rate is the thing that we're going to be judged on. Getting to a number on a non-recurrent win on an HMRC claim isn't going to get us a pat on the back, and nor should it. So this sort of exit run rate bit is going to be a real focus of the performance meetings with PwC and internally through IFRB. So all the actions I think you'll see from PwC really, they're all pay focused, they're all grip and control focused, they're all absolutely on workforce and headcount. And some of the mitigations that the sites presented this week to me, and you'll probably hear about today, are exactly the same. What else can we do on grip, control, pay, run rate? Because it's the only thing. And I think as well, going into a multi-year financial recovery plan, unless we can demonstrate a move to an underlying run rate that's beating that or under that 100 million mark, you're still sitting there in a six-figure underlying run rate. Sorry, not six figures. You understand what I mean, 7 figures. We're going to be on a hide into nothing really, because that just tells you, doesn't it, that the 2-year financial recovery plan is really a 5 or 6 year one. So we've got to see that shift on the exit run rate. So we'll be reporting that as well, Mike, as an indicator.
Thank you.
David, please.
Yeah, thank you. And just a comment. I've not seen this presentation before. Just comment on immediate reaction to the figures in the presentation, and a question from me really. If I understood it correctly, when Rob was running through the pack, he said that our whole time equivalent performance was some 400 whole time equivalents adrift of our plan. And I'm sure that's correct. But could we just look at the presentation of that? Because my recollection was that our plan was we'd reduce our whole time equivalent numbers by 1,100. So if we're 400 adrift from the plan, in my mind, that means we've shed 700 posts. And I think that could be presented more positively, unless you're one of the posts we've shed. So I just wonder about the presentation of that. And the second thing is you give us, Rob, in the finance report, some assurance that we're paying our traders on time. Cash seems really, really tight. So we're paying our traders on time. We'd hear about it on Northwest Tonight if we weren't paying our staff on time. But what about the other things? Can we have some assurance that we are paying HMRC on time and that we're paying the superannuation division on time? Just so that extraordinary low level of cash that we have in the bank is being managed, and we understand what's happening there. Thank you.
Rob, I'll collect some points up before coming back to you. Is that okay? Thank you. Next we go to Jackie, please.
Thank you. Rob, I'm just really interested in the comment you made about the quality impact assessment being illuminating. I don't know whether it's illuminating bad or illuminating good. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, next, please.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. Very complex situation, lots of things to digest. So I'll raise a few points at board next week. I think we have a difficult situation to manage here financially. However, we can't lose sight of what's been achieved from the end of the 24-25 financial year. So I think that progress needs to, be demonstrated, although I appreciate it's a difficult message. I just wanted a bit of context, Rob, in terms of what's happening within the system. We have a difficult financial position, but I'm sure some of the big DGHs are in a similar position, and it'd be helpful just to get a bit of regional context in terms of how we fare compared to some others. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Jeffrey?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. The worrying for me on the CIPs is what the impact will that be next year? So we've done some adjustments in the balance sheet to achieve what we want to achieve, but that's not going to give us where we need to be in terms of the recurrent CIPs for next year. So we're going to face a big challenge there. I agree with Mike on the narrative. I think we can paint the narrative in a different way. It always seems to me if you answer the questions in the narrative that the critics would put, then you're not being defensive, and then you actually are giving an explanation. I think, and also picking on Sue's point, to actually put the positive side too in the narrative would be helpful. But I think critically you need to answer the questions that will be asked of you in the narrative.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Rob, back to you on those collection of points and questions, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the questions. So starting with David, in terms of the whole time equivalents, absolutely correct. You recall and I think in the pack, in the Luft detail pack, there is a slide entitled pay that takes us through this calculation. What we've talked about previously is that we needed on an average basis to save around about 1183 posts in the year, and that was across the board. Now, when we started the year, we had our whole time paid was significantly under where our budget was because we had vacancies and gaps, and that has continued. So we're paying under, and when we put in the whole time the workforce plan based on a reasonable assumption as to what would actually happen, that was just put in on a straight line basis. So actually from day one there was a misalignment in terms of getting the pay aligned to where the whole time equivalence required, because really we needed the 1183 out at the beginning of the year, but that was never going to happen. What we had assumed and what was true, that we had some things that we knew we non-recurrently could throw in to buy ourselves some time. Unfortunately, as we've got to month 5 and month 6, those two lines have met each other, and we're now above on the WTE position where we said we would be effectively, and that will continue to the end of the year based on month 6 to this level of about 400, and that will change again in month 7 based on our review. So you are correct, we were under in terms of a workforce plan, in terms of number of heads we had, budget versus actual for the first 4 months of the year, and then that has caught up. But in terms of pay, we've been over since day one, because we're trying to catch up and get those recurrent actions in place that we've just talked about. So happy to go through that again, David, but you are correct in the terms of we were paying less than we had in budget, and that was a known position. And in fact, you recall that we've been holding vacancies, particularly in the corporate areas, specifically looking forward to LASPN UHLG consolidation as well. So hopefully that explains it, but happy to go through it again. In terms of QI review, Jackie, just to be clear, it's not the QIA reviews, it's what we were asked, what we've been planning for a while, and were asked to do was a quality impact methodology called impact review of using the QI team to get it into a deep dive of some of the workforce practices. So what the team did, they ran a week-long event at Aintree where they got nurses, operational staff, finance staff, other managers involved, and went through in detail for a specific couple of wards, well, what happens on a daily basis, what makes you trigger whether your ward is safe, your staffing ratios, etc. And I think we're still waiting for the written findings, but some of the initial views were that communication link was not always fully plugged in between what the manager thought was going on and on the ward staff, where they're saying, oh, I need another person because that's what I'm used to. So there's a little bit of work to do there that goes a little bit towards the grip and control stuff and just making sure that everything's linked in. So that's what I meant by illuminating, because we got really into the weeds of it. Hopefully that's okay. In terms of the regional position, Sue, yeah, we include that in the finance report. The region remains a little bit like Luft. It's on plan at month 6, but again, the forecast is significantly off plan to the tune of around about 50 million at this point, mid case. And that is the reason, frankly, that NHSE regional is assessing, well, we'll hold back deficit support funding because we're not convinced you're going to hit your plan as a system, not as an individual trust. So it's a very similar method. In terms of the drivers for that, a lot of that is driven by continuing healthcare. They are massively over budget in that area, and so they've got a big element of focus, and the use of the independent sector that they are again significantly overperforming on and paying above their plan. And the independent sector is quite litigious and robust in challenging them to change that. So obviously, as NHS providers, we're saying that's madness. Why redirect the work to us? Why did you set it up that way? And the rhetoric from the ITB is they're trying, but they're getting quite a bit of pushback from the independent sector. And then, so hopefully that covers that area. And then in terms of the narrative, and to take Mike and Jeffrey's point, absolutely, and just to reassure that it's not a narrative we're saying we're all okay because of nothing's changeable from our point of view, but factually at month 6 we are on plan except for deficit support funding. That's all I was trying to say. We're on plan for Luft and we're off plan for and we're ahead of plan for Liverpool Women's. The drivers behind that quite clearly is pay. That's our biggest overrunning area. That is the reason why we would miss our year-end target, and that's with or without deficit support funding. And that's the area of focus, therefore, that we are pointing PwC towards in the main to help us most on. So if I gave the wrong impression, I apologise, but we're certainly acutely aware that that's our area of focus. I think that was all the questions.
Thank you, Rob. Well done. So we'll get into the side reports in a moment, but I think it's important for us as a committee and next week as a book and beyond as a board to be focused in the structure of our consideration of the financial issues. We spoke in the NEDS meeting out with the governance structure, but I spoke in the NEDS meeting last week about this spectrum from have we got enough cash today to pay who we need to pay in, all the way through to at what point do we become financially sustainable in a financially sustainable system? And that is at some point in 2028. And key points in the meantime around, are we going to hit our plan at the year end? What is the exit run rate better than the entry run rate for the year? And all those in different ways, all the issues we've discussed focus on those, but they're the key measures that we need to focus on. Now, look, it's all, pay has always been the thing that, you know, ultimately we have to get right in order to succeed across all of those things, and we're still not there. A very positive I take from where we're at is we're 7 months into the year now, and we've not been hit by any unknown unknowns. And ultimately, that's what would really knock us miles off course. Something comes out of left field that we hadn't anticipated, we haven't seen coming, and hits our position in the bottom line. And I think as a committee today, we can take appropriate assurance that we've not been hit by, and looking into the remainder of this year, hopefully will be the same. We're not been hit by any unknown unknowns that we just didn't see coming. What we've got a number of known unknowns around the responsibilities others take for funding deficit support. There's nothing we can do to influence or control that. There's issues around income for work that we've undertaken and funding for winter that we've discussed previously that we can influence but not control. And I think part of our narrative is to come back to Mike's point, and they can sit side by side, are those things that we think are reasonable and justifiable that we can expect a constructive resolution of in a system, and those things that we absolutely control are known knowns. I think as we come together as committee today, one of the difficulties on this narrative at Workforce is this, and it might be a lead time issue, James, and this point only strikes me as we go through the presentation. We've gone through 2.5 years where we've said, yeah, it's very difficult to control pay because in large part of the no criteria to reside. Right, we've got all these people, we have to keep beds open. As reported today, we've got the lowest number of no criteria to reside since records began. Still not as low as we want to get it to, but slow since records began. Yet, in the past where we've connected a cause and effect on workforce numbers, we've not yet got anything on that impacting into the workforce number going forward, if I've understood it correctly. So is it that winter pressures just overrides all of that now and we have to come out the other end? But can we distinguish between, in times of peace, what the impact on the workforce of being able to model through the lowest number of no criteria to reside that we've seen in a formal committee before into the rest of the year, because that's all part of the carry forward of run rate from this year. So I'm not explaining this very well, but it's how you connect all those moving parts into a sensible narrative. Having said, but this is why we can't do it, and then we do it, how that works. I think it's important we try and get through what we've agreed on the workforce and finance projections that we've seen today, how we get a better understanding of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the fundamental issue that we need, I've got to be careful, this is potentially too quotable, but the biggest problem for NHS finances at the moment and in the last couple of years is that there's been a hidden cost saving, not any other saving, from the inability to recruit nursing staff 5 years ago. So what the fundamental issue is all of the time is, as fast as and every other, same across the board, every other organisation, if you look at the C&M position, everybody's putting controls in on pay, on agency, on bank, everybody's at their lowest number ever, everybody's spending less on these temporary pay costs, and as they're doing it, their fill rates are going up and up and up. because we can recruit nurses now in a way that we could 3 to 5 years ago. And that bears out. If you take a look at the Love staffing, just as an example, we were in the 80s when we started this turnaround job, and we're now in the sort of high 90s in terms of staffing at ward level substantively. At what point as an NHS organisation do you turn around and say, actually 90% of nurses is enough? Yeah, very difficult to do, isn't it? And at the same time, you've got anything between 90 and 100, you're now able to fill with bank. You can close that totality with bank. And you know, I've explained this. I explained this to the previous NHS CFO. You can really see it. So the biggest cost to NHS organisations is staff. The biggest group of staff is nursing, and we are getting more and more nurses across all the NHS organisations because they are there now in a way that they weren't 5 years ago. So my fundamental worry is, I'll give you a live example. There's almost that Aintree have had more success at closing beds this year than ever, haven't they? And done that for a good part of the year. They've held vacancies on the basis that if the beds stay closed, you know, they can then actually take the cost out. But then, you know, the beds can't stay closed in winter. It makes no sense to do it through bank and agency. They'll probably have to recruit again. So the headcount numbers are going to go up again. Now, when those headcount numbers go up again, and we fill those posts, those vacancies come in, does Pete then ban the use of bank in wards that are still at 90%? How do you do that? And every time you take that problem to anywhere, region, national, they sort of go, oof, that's, difficult. Now, with all of that in mind, there's still a lot we can do, and the I&I and the grip and control stuff tells us this, to manage down that overuse, certain periods, in certain wards, and the stuff Rob talks about showing us we can do more on that, so that's good. But that's the fundamental issue, and that's the big worry, is if you've got an availability of staff and you're not at 100% staffing rates, how do NHS organisations tackle that? And for me, that's just overtaking all the other stuff. It's masking the ability to move stuff around.
So at what point do we come back with your plan on how we are going to tackle that?
Well, that's exactly what we're talking to PwC. So Rob's just done, for example, this thing of if you've got controls in place. If I set this out really quickly, because I know we're short on time, really quickly. We, over the last 3 years that we've been trying to get a grip of these things in this organisation and wherever it was to wherever it is now, we didn't even know how many people we had a few years ago. We've said that before, didn't we? We then got to the point of saying, right, good grip and control over rostering. Then we got to the point of saying, right, the substantive nurse staffing, so sorry, the trained nurse staffing and then the HCA staffing. HCA's was 120% because it was compensating for the fact we didn't have enough trained on wards. Now we've got enough trained on wards, we're managing that down. Then we've had the thing about, right, well, how much of that managing down to 100% is realistic when you've got non-criteria to reside patients who need lots of specialty and support and other things? So you allow a threshold of 100 to 110%. So you're constantly sort of narrowing the ability to spend money you shouldn't be spending. Where we really need to get to with PwC's help is, how can we have assurance that we've got really, really good controls on all sorts of absences and leave that might be masking the fact that we're using that bank to fill things that we shouldn't have to? So how do you build it up and say, what's the total availability of staff? Why have we got a situation on this ward? This is for illustration rather than fact, where somebody's had 60 days of special leave, what's that about? And what we need to get to is that really fine daily detail of that rostering and staffing, rather than where we are now, which is not this sort of free-for-all that we had 3 years ago, but almost we're operating within thresholds and making the assumption that there's a professional judgment. What the work Rob described has shown is that we've still got a situation where in wards, if it feels unsafe, you can go ahead and book staff. Whereas what now, there are controls around that, but you can see it's easy to do. What David and others will want to get to is acuity-based rostering, based on fact, based on what patients you've got today, rather than an assumption that you used all those extra shifts last night because you had complex patients. So it's constantly refining the level of information that you can use to plan that staffing. And I think we're sort of 70% of the way down that journey. This PwC work is trying to help us do that last bit, because that is where we still got an issue. There's still an assumption that we needed those staff rather than facts and data ahead of time telling us that we did based on acuity.
Okay, so that's the work that
That's some of it, but medical staffing is the same. You know, we've got, I still think, well, we know we've got big challenges around how easy it is to book a waiting list initiative that really should be used for additional elective activity, but maybe is being used to cover a gap. How can we be certain that we didn't have other opportunities to cover that gap? So they're going to help us with the daily scrutiny and information to be tighter on that on a daily basis, rather than looking back and saying, why did we use that much?
Okay. Thank you. This is a very important detail. And look, for the committee, we're taking time on this, but this is the bit that the whole pay issue, as we've acknowledged, is the biggest risk to us, both in the short, medium and long term, in terms of our continued progress and improvement. Now, we're getting to the site reports. I don't want to limit what anyone says, but as was identified in Rob's report, the team with Jonathan at Liverpool Heart and Chest, and the team with Jenny at Liverpool Women's, and our regular banker of the DTC with Beth are look, it's not easy for anyone to manage the budgets. And we sort of raise our eyebrows a bit, Jonathan, sometimes at the healthy financial balances at the Heart and Chest. Let's, for the avoidance of any doubt, none of this comes easy. It's a result of day-to-day management, whether you're in surplus or delivering debt. And the women's side and the Heart side are doing well. That I don't think we need to get back into the finances at those two sides, and that's not to trivialize it or say it isn't significant the progress that's being made. But as we go through the sites, if we do need to come back to the money issues and the impact on that, we'll focus today on the Royal and on Aintree. So we start with Liverpool Women's Hospital. Jenny, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And on you, my active files. So the high risk for the Women's. You can see from the information presented that we have decreased the IPC risk now, given that the recruitment and resource is in place. There are no changes to the other scores of the risks, which are linked to pharmacy and meds management, cash, operational performance and safety on site, and you can see the updates that we put against those. If I just though focus in on operational performance and on-site safety in terms of the discussions that we are having. So the metrics for operational performance are set out in the paper with all the issues that Liverpool Women's is experiencing in terms of cancer performance and elective recovery, and in terms of our position in the tiering. In Appendix 3, I've just included some of the actions that we've done to date based on those recovery plans that we have in place and where some of those things are up to. And what we're seeing in more recent data is that positions stopped deteriorating and indeed some cases improved. So we're starting to see those actions kick in. You can see the actions that are taking place during this month of November, which we expect to see continue the position and get us to our year-end trajectory. We've put in and included all of the clock stops and interventions related to those actions. Our challenge to ourselves has been, can we do more in Q4? Should not all of Q3 come to fruition? And we think we can. So at the moment, we are still confident that we will move towards achieving those trajectories. In terms of our 65-week rates at month 6, we had 0, which was great, but we know that there are breaches at month 7, and we will be reporting those next month. And those reasons included patient choice, some patients who weren't fit clinically, and some requiring additional testing and diagnosis. I think further in terms of the cancer performance, so month 6, our indicative performance, we report month 5, a month in arrears in the pack. We have seen the faster diagnosis improve and this one day improve as well. We've really seen some benefits from the opening of the ambulatory suite, which we did a month or 2 ago. That's really supported our FDS, and we're getting people through to hysteroscopy quicker. The one thing that's not happening is that referrals aren't abating. So we're still seeing high numbers of referrals into the service, and we continue to work with primary care, and we're also introducing a new pathway for those with HRT bleeding pathway. So I think positive improvements from that point of view. I think the biggest risk in relation to this is moving into next year, next financial year, and the demand and capacity planning and the funding for that. One of the issues that we've had is that within the envelope there is only so much activity we can deliver. So we're going to have some conversations around that with commissioners in terms of how that activity is funded going forward, so we continue to improve our position. In terms of the on-site safety risks, we renewed our focus on this through the Improvement Portfolio Board, which is one of those areas that you can see in the appendix where we look at in the Transformation Board. The medical emergency team is now up and running, and we'll review the efficacy of that January, February time in terms of the incidents that have been managed. The blood transfusion solution is in its final stages in terms of delivery to sites, and we expect that to be received here December at the latest. I think that by the time we've got people fully trained and signed off, by the end of the financial year, that will be fully in use. So I think just then in summary for Liverpool Women's, and I'll take questions on the detail within the papers, but we are on our financial plan, and we are obviously not with our gynae cancer and elective. We've got no issues arising from the review of the maternity incentive scheme that we did during the board and the perinatal dashboard. The one thing I probably would pull out from that, though, obviously we've got an eye on induction of labour delays. You can see in September that they did go up again, but you'll also recall that September is our winter in maternity. Basically, we have a really high demand on the service. But if you look at how it was in the preceding year, it's a huge improvement to September last year. So I think that really just demonstrates the impact of the ongoing work. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Thank you. Points, question. Are we coming back to CNST?
I wasn't going to, but
we'll just take that.
Questions, yeah.
Yeah, okay. David first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jenny. My computer just kicked me out of admin control, so forgive me. I'm speaking from memory. But I thought that the papers said that we won't achieve the 62-day cancer target by the end of March, which is a concern. And I was surprised to see that and the single site issue don't feature as 12+ on our corporate risk register.
I'm not entirely sure where you're looking, David, about the not hitting the target. I'll have a look at that shortly. But in terms of the risks, they are on our site risk register as 12+. So there's 2 in relation to the on-site safety and 5 in relation to achievement of the standards. So they are in my HMB report. The issue around the corporate risk register, that's where we're just defining how the individual site risks then translate onto the corporate risk register, which is a piece of work that Claire Alexander came and presented to us a month or so ago in terms of how we bring those into the corporate risk register. But they are on the HMB register and presented to ARC today.
Right, thank you. I say sorry, I can't get back into admin control at the moment, so I was based on my memory, which is not good. But thank you for that assurance. Thanks, Jenny.
I'll go away and have a look. Thank you.
Jackie, please.
So 2 things, if I may, Jen. First one is around the prompt training, and I know we've recognised that for doctors in rotation that we also always have a dip around August time, but I was a little bit concerned to see our consultants are down at 70% as substantive staff members, so I wondered if we could have a look at that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was around the transformation, and I just wondered why 21% of the schemes were showing as late, because that's quite a significant number.
Yeah, sorry, I should have pulled that out, Jackie. That's one of the reasons why we did the deep dive into some of it, and the majority of that was in relation to the robotic solution. And whilst they actually happening within the group that's managing that meets every fortnight. It hadn't been updating through the transformation system in terms of the actions that have been taken. So they've been taken and recorded in the group, but not then translated into the transformation update. So I was assured yesterday in the deep dive that they are on with that, and that's just a catch-up piece that you will see that improve. Yeah, share your concerns as well around just some of the uptake of the prompt training. We know that it goes in fits and starts, and you'll have seen in the paper as well the work we're doing with the anaesthetic doctors and getting them picked up through induction. But we'll monitor that. Jackie and the team will make sure that we get everybody pulled in. I think there's quite a lot of pull on capacity at the minute through consultants, through consultant step downs with all the activity we're doing as well. So, but we will keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. At what point, Jenny, do we get if indeed it works like this, a step change in the RTT performance around the gynae stuff? When would you see that coming?
So I think if we look at our trajectories and in a couple of months' time when we've got the capacity back up and running in November, what our aim was to focus much at it to get to the end of Q3, but I don't think that's going to be enough to sustain us into the change. So what my concern is that we'll get onto our trajectory this year, but we are going to have to step change into next year. So it's like a piece that's going to get us, we'll do what we've said this year, and that's kind of set out over the next few months with a focus on the next couple of months to get us back up to that, to do that step change. But I think this year's going to be, we're going to need another step change to get anywhere near where we need to be moving forward. That's around the capacity of the farmers.
Thank you. Sue, please.
Hi, Jen. Could I just ask a question around the CQC inspection report and the recommendations and how that's progressing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so we monitor those too. But if you recall, there wasn't anything really significant on there. So things like signage, etc., which we've got through the capital plan. So they are progressing and monitored through. I've got no concerns around.
Okay, good. So progress as expected. Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Much other questions on Jenny's overall risk report or CNS or the perinatal stage? Like we're looking at in a good place. James?
It was a general point. The areas where we're off track against our annual plan for the year, including the performance which Jenny's just described, the 1% RTT and some of the 12 hours stuff at the Royal and Angel. We're just producing a sort of single short form improvement plan style pack that we're going to use through our exec meetings to keep a track of those. Rather than introduce them into more board papers, I think it's useful if we'll just circulate those to NEDs as for information on a regular basis when we've got them. It'll just give you simplistically a chart for each of the areas where we are potentially off track with the year's performance and where we are on that trajectory to improve it. Again, not trying to expand the IPR because the data is actually in there, but it'll just consolidate very short form. These are the areas we're off track. We've got that coming to our exec meeting for the first time, 18th of November. So by the end of the month, I think we just start sharing those virtually with the board. It just give you an extra bit of simple assurance to look at on one page.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Beth, diagnostic board, please.
Thank you, Chair. So from the report, I just want to pull out the fact that we've got 5 risks which are 12 plus, all related to finance, 2 specifically for pharmacy, 1 for imaging and 2 for DTC in general. 2 issues to escalate that I just want to make people aware of. We had an assessment from the quality assurance pharmaceutical Northwest, looking at the our provision of drugs to the Walton Centre. This is on a separate licence because they are a different statutory organisation, and we have received, or they've advised, that they are concerned about some areas to do with our contractual obligations. and therefore we are going to, we've got an action plan for to remedy those areas where there's shortcomings, but also I have spoken to James about, as part of the moving forward and the design of the pharmacy service moving forward, we were going to also ask and arrange for a peer review from a comparable organisation. And the second is we have identified a problem, a digital have been LCL, and the referring clinician being unable to see the outcome. Digital are fully involved, leading on this to identify a fix to the problem. And that's been done. There was 1,200 reports we had to look at. 600 have been done. No patient harm identified, and we will review the remaining 600. Just from an operational performance point of view, LCL, we want to see some improvements on the testing for A&E, but we have purchased new analyzers and also implemented new processes, which should capacity increase and also speed up processing. And the only one other thing to say on pharmacy, we do need to see some operational improvements on performance. We are looking at capacity to meet the demand in the dispensaries, and also we're looking at storage, and not only about people locking cupboards, etc., but also improving the storage facilities. And I've spoken to James Thompson this morning, and there's some new ways of doing that Pete and team are helping us to implement. The only final two things, and I'll just then go to finance, is that PIP raise. There are still outstanding SOPs to be updated from a pharmacy point of view. There are 25 seen as a priority, and I am going to help PIP get increase the capacity to get those SOPs updated. And the second thing is we are on track to deliver the requirements set out in the Fuller report phase 2, and that was in the mortuary, and we had a good discussion on that, and we are pleased with the progress that they are making, and we have agreed 2 deviations to the recommendations in that phase 2, which will further strengthen our processes, so we were content with that. So from a financial point of view, I took your lead, Dave. I will not be sharing the slides because you said you wanted to focus on Aintree and the Royal. So my overview is this: from a month 6 position, income is up. Activity related expenditure is also up, so it has created a pressure of 190,000 in the PC in the CP delivery, which is driving the £1 million deficit. So we are happy with the forecast that we have. When I say happy, we are confident with the forecast that we have said at month 6, which is 3.2 million deficit by the year end. That takes into account our winter costs and also our planned run rate reduction. We have excluded the 25% delivery against a red scheme, which is about over delivering against contract in LCL. So that will feature as part of the 26-27 discussions, contractual discussions. However, we are pleased to report that we are going to recalculate that forecast, taking into account the gain share, £1 million gain share we'll get on pharmacy, and also the discretionary controls we've put in will deliver another just short of £500,000. So therefore we will be saying our mid forecast should be 1.3 million, which will give us 1.9 million, which is 80% of our CIP and 6% of our cost base. So that I was going to finish there and open up for questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Very clear. Very clear. Points, questions? Anyone, please? Intent to receive? all of that. Very comprehensive. Thank you, Beth. Peter, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's 13 risks on the risk register. That's the same number as last month, so there's nothing new on there. So I was going to then just focus on 3 specific things: finance, the UEC position, and the long beta position. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, if that's okay, to show you the Aintree forecast position, if I can work out how to do that. That's the right slide. Yep. Okay. If I put on full screen. Can you all see that okay?
Yeah, we don't like it, but we can see it, Peter.
Okay, yeah, thank you, David. This is the Aintree forecast. This is using the same methodology that Rob described earlier in his presentation. So this is based on month 6 position. And there's obviously a lot of risk in that, and then some mitigations to be worked through, which I'm going to come on to at the end. But this is basically what was in our CIP tracker at the end of month 6. If you use the formulaic equation that Rob has shared with you all, this is where Aintree ends up. You can see the mid case is £13.2 million away from plan, and best case, in other words, if we did what's in all of what's in our current tracker, we would be 9.8 million away from a financial perspective. We've done the same, if I can move that on, it's the same in terms of the workforce WTE position. What you can see in this slide is that at the start of the year we had 5,480 full-time equivalents in budget. As you know, the Aintree target was a reduction by 400, so that takes us to 5,079 based on the workforce plan by the end of the year. If you then follow through the same methodology from month 6, so obviously lots of risks in that because there's still some wards, etc., that in the month 6 tracker that were planned to close, and I'll come back to that. Then the mid-case position was we would be 104 WTE away from plan at the end of the year, and best case again 73, as if everything came off in the tracker. But then move us on to the risks in that, because there is considerable risk based on month 6, and we've moved this on, and obviously, as James said, we'll have this all finalised by the next 2 weeks. The risks are, we in those sort of predictions and forecasts, we assume that the income over is funded by the commissioners. We have got some plans within that month 6 position regarding orthopaedics and repatriation either from the independent sector or from other organisations in Cheshire and Mersey, and the risk there is that we have to then deliver that in business as usual capacity. As I already said, there's further ward closures planned in the month 6 position, and there's we rely on our system partners in terms of the reduction in NCTR patients that we need to see to make that happen, and we actually discussed that already this morning. It assumes that winter pressures are managed within the support available, and there's and again we've talked about this, there's some pace required, particularly on the medical productivity savings and WIs that we're working on, and working in partnership with PwC on. The mitigations in place, I think we've covered most of these already this morning, but is the work that James was describing earlier on with the system to ensure we do get some funding for winter. And we'll cover that further in the winter plan, no doubt. There is an opportunity for us with some patients from north of the border in Scotland, and that so we're working that up, and that does also require some approval from First Minister in Scotland if that comes off. We're working to enact and draw up a site recovery plan. We're doing that PwC in terms of the actions that we have asked them to work with us on. We need to get support for the overperformance performance in terms of the activity we've done year to date. And then the 2 or 3 key bits left really, and again I think we've covered most of this. Pay is the big issue at Aintree, as it is across the trust, and that grip and control action that Rob was talking about earlier on, that's really key for Aintree. So ensuring that is all in place and that the process measures are all there in enacted, particularly from Aintree around the roster compliance, and the description that James was giving earlier on is vital in Aintree in terms of that 90% plus or minus the temporary spend, etc. So that's going to be really key, and also the WLI reductions that we need to see. There's a bit, that's the what if you like, is a bit for us as well, and in terms of the how we do that. And Jackie, that's the rapid improvement event that Rob was discussing earlier. We did at Aintree, and there was sort of 3 key actions came out of that. So we can put these things in place, but how do we make sure they translate into the savings that we require? And for there's a typical sort of QI methodology falling out to that on Fishbones and action plans, etc., to make sure that there is that true connection between ward and board in terms of what's required. And then the team have been going through realigning the CIP schemes so that we know that forecast in the next 2 weeks. So that's the risks and the mitigations to where we are. So I'll stop sharing there so I can see you all again. If I then just go through those other things and I'll pause for questions, and all of it at the end, I think is probably the simplest way. In terms of the financial position in month 6, it's in the paper. But in summary, we are 7.4 million worse than plan in Aintree year to date at the end of month 6. The majority of the variances in pay, as Mike pointed out earlier on. From an income position, relatively strong, 3.6 million year to date ahead of plan. In terms of expenditure, pay on 6 was 1.2 million behind plan. That's a relatively consistent position, meaning we are now 7.2 million year to date behind plan. Therefore, really does explain that 7.4 million position. CIP was relatively strong month for us, with 3.26 million delivered in month 6 against a target of 0.96. That puts us year to date at 15 from a CIP perspective versus a 16.9 plan, and the full year effect of that is 24.9 million. So that's the pay, but that's the financial position at the end of month 6 from Aintree. In terms of UEC, just briefly touch on that, because that's a key risk remaining. I think I said last month that August position was the strongest it's been in Aintree. That then continued, I think, is what I said, for the first 3 weeks of September, and then the pressures hit. That then has had an impact on the overall month 6 figure. So for our type 1 performance was 49% at Aintree, which is behind our trajectory. We were ahead of trajectory in August. Ambulance handovers were at 32 minutes overall in month 6, which is ahead of target, and 12 hours in department were at 16%. If you look at the SPC chart, that there's 8 points now below the mean, which has been improvement in that, but it needs to be in terms of the target of 10%. The no criteria preside position, again, we've discussed that quite a bit. At the end of month 6, we were at 178 at Aintree. That has improved, and if you look at our SPC chart over the last 4 weeks, you get 4 points now below the mean. So there has been some improvement, as James has said, but we are still at 155 patients, which is higher than we really need to be if we were to close more wards. And then just to say, because I think this is a national issue, of flu. If you look at the flu diagnosis in the community, there's an exponential rise. You see that nationally now, and that has been actually raised, hasn't it? And so we're in the early flu season, and I think that is contributing to some of the pressures we're seeing at the front door. We're doing at the minute is working with NWAS on our handover 45 position to make sure there's a clear area provided for NWAS colleagues to hand over patients from their ambulances. 45 minutes, working with system partners on those P1 and P3, and Alan Butler's agreed now to help us from a system perspective. Yes, to come and help us at Aintree, and then embedding the top improvements in our discharge. Aintree, with the real close. Elective position. Cancer, we're all above trajectory, and FDS is above target. The issue for us effectively is the non-weight position. From a 65-week weight position at the end of month 6, we had 95 patients waiting longer than 65 weeks, which was down from 137. There was 2 waiting 78 weeks. That has remained a focus for us in the last month. However, there is still some patients waiting at the end of October longer than 65 weeks, which is not where we wanted to be. The ENT position has improved, so the issue now really is around the maxillofacial unit position, and some of which are complex patients, single consultant patients. But we know basically names of all those patients and are tracking them through through November. And we have submitted some plans along with Beth's team to improve the 1% 52-week position by the end of Q3, and we know exactly what the entry trajectory is, and an action plan has been agreed on that as well. So the rest is in the paper. So just with time, I'm not going to go through everything. There's lots of discussions had. I've highlighted them in the paper, but I think those are the 3 key areas I'd need to escalate from an entry position, and so I'll take questions at that point, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. No point to be. Good presentation, very challenging position. Go to Jackie first, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, if I may, Pete, and thanks for the update. It was really clear. But an area that you haven't mentioned, because you've focused on your 3 escalation areas, was around the EDI work. And I just wondered a little bit around how you're going to feed that as a committee around the cultural ambassadors, and whether you're making a difference around disciplinaries for people from the global majority was one thing. And then the other thing was around, you mentioned flu vaccination uptake. I know we've got a paper later on, but in there, we're not really showing the site stuff and by clinical groups. So I just wondered if you've got any concerns around that.
So if I take the latter first, that's probably the easiest to answer. So yes, concerns, Jackie, in terms of when you look at the position and you see the flu numbers going up, then we need to put some pace and purpose behind uptake of the flu vaccine. There's no specific areas that are of concern. It's across the board of the entry. So we spent a fair amount of time going through with the HMB and the senior leaders in the room about the importance of that. Diana Hadcock and her team from occupational health, really to make sure that there's a couple of actions came out. So there's a fixed place just downstairs from me now, outside the boardroom, and also in the vaccination centre. But I think that could be elsewhere because it's a little bit further away from the ward-based team. So we're talking to them about that, and also increasing the roving teams that are going ward to ward so that you get your injection whilst you're working, so to speak. So we're really trying to focus on the latter. I think bringing the flu jab to the teams as opposed to the other way around, I think is really important. In terms of the perspective, so we have a 12-point plan in the entry to try and improve where we are from an EDI perspective. The conversation about the cultural ambassador stuff was we put some sort of leaflets and things in place around this, but actually there's something really about people to person, people to people conversations, really. And something I'm working on as part of the Liverpool City Region Race Equality Programme is telling stories, bringing it to life, and so really trying to make human to human connections and see if that then improves. I feel like going through those processes. So the other important point is make sure the right people are going through the right process. But there's something here about supporting colleagues through it. And piece of paper does something, doesn't it? But it is not that human connection, and that's really where we're going to change what we key focus on the conversation we had last week. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you. Other questions on the entry report? Okay, thank you. Pete, on the long wait specialties, you say that the ENT situation's improved significantly down the MFU. We get the broad sort of macro level comparisons of other trusts. There's lots of other trusts in there doing MFU services, all have single-handed consultant challenges and patients for all to have a high level of performance. So we highlight the supplies. There's something I'm choose for us on the service, not just some others can use.
You're absolutely right, David. These numbers are mostly what you just described, which is the more complex end, and there is a lot of complex work 3-session lists that are going on in Aintree. There is, however, and it's a bit similar to ENT actually. What we've uncovered, there's a number of other cases being referred in to the Max Fax unit here at Aintree that probably could be within dentistry or dental hospital services. So teeth extractions are a number of those. So we're working with the Royal site, and Neil and Joe are linking in as to whether or not we can move some of those long waiters from simple teeth, if you like, if there's such a thing, to other areas, and then using the ENT experience to really make sure that the right patients are coming to what is a tertiary level service here at Aintree, and not this sort of more simple work which could be done elsewhere. The problem is that there's the avenues for the more simple work to be done are not easily accessible, so they end up in our list. But we're trying to work through how do we control that demand using the experiences. That's exactly what we did in ENT. So we're using that experience to try and make sure we're doing the work that really we should be doing. To be honest. Yeah,
and on that, you describe it as being the patient getting to the right place within our different sites and different departments and so on. Is there a broader system issue on this in terms of that, and what are we doing to try and influence that more?
So there is, and I think there is a system commissioning meeting coming up around teeth in particular. Are we getting are the right services available for people who need teeth extractions, and is there another avenue that is not the tertiary referral centre? So there's a conversation with the ICB, I think, coming up in the next couple of weeks on that issue.
Okay, I mean, we're all under all the system and all the component parts from the just handing off responsibility to somewhere else. I think it's important that we look for the commission.
So that would be helpful, David. Let us have these conversations. I think the meeting it's been hard to get in diaries, but I think it's in diaries for the next, I think it's last week in November. And let's have that conversation with them. You're right, these patients are by default ending up in the Max Fax unit when there is other better places for them to be, really. So even if you come from a patient angle, it is much easier to have those teeth extracted elsewhere than it is in a major trauma centre.
Okay, thank you. Any other points on Peter's report? Encouraging on the ambulance handovers, but I'm guessing that all that gets a bit more difficult as we move forward.
Yes, sadly, the position in October has deteriorated. So this was the sort of end of September position. So we have been extremely challenged, David, on ambulance handovers in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So the focus there is ensuring that space is free, but also we need to open some capacity. We've lost 15 beds to IPC, which has increased the pressure through the department. So we're trying to open some ward beds just to mitigate those IPC position, and then hopefully take some pressure off so we can keep the ambulance handover space free and available for what it's supposed to be for, which is ambulance handover.
Okay, thank you, Peter. If there's no more points on that, we'll move on to the Royal, and Joanne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious there's a few people on the call I haven't met before, so just to introduce myself, I'm Director of Ops for the Royal site. I will just focus in on 3 areas really. I'll go focusing on the finance and whole time equivalent update, key escalations with regards to the IPR, and then a very high level overview of a few new risks that have gone on to our risk register at a 12 or above. Just before I go on to the slides, I suppose just to update you on our month 6 position, because it helps to inform some of the conversations with the slides. Our year-to-date position, including Broad Green, is a £9 million adverse variance. We've overachieved so far at 7.8 million in terms of our contract income. So we continue to hold a strong position there, of which 4.1 million of that relates to pass-through costs. Our pressure is our expenditure position, which is an adverse position year to date of 15.1 million. 10.4 of that is related to pay, and within that 10.4, 6.9 million is related to under delivery of CIP. 2.5 million relates to WLI costs, and then the remainder is industrial action and 4.6 million of non-pay costs. I'll just share my screen. Has that come up on screen now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So this is our forecast position, exactly the same methodology that's already been presented previously. So as you can see on here, our mid-case position for us, and again, this is including the Broad Green site, would be an 11.8 million shortfall against plan. If I just move on to our whole time equivalent, again, exactly the same methodology. You can see there that against our plan, we are 424 whole time equivalents. If we were to go for the mid-case position by end of year, we would have a shortfall of 424 whole time equivalents. What I do want to just raise here really is in terms of the Royal site. We have supported a number of business cases because we recognised the historic reliance on WLIs historically to deliver our baseline capacity and activity plan. And as a result of that, we've invested in a number of our services, and we will, as a result of that, see an increase in headcount. But what we will be able to demonstrate to you going forward is a reduction in our run rate. So that will become evident, particularly from month 7 onwards. We also just need to acknowledge that with some of the recruitment that we're doing within nursing at the moment, it's really positive, as already referenced, that we have been able to recruit to our vacancies, but a significant proportion of those are newly qualified staff. So again, taking into consideration our month 6 position, it is actually factoring in some double running costs because of their supernumerary status currently. In terms of the risks and mitigations, again, very similar to what we've been talking about already. And we are very much reliant, if we are to achieve the midpoint position by year end, then the real challenge for us as a site is that we would have to, instead of having a deficit of 1.5 million per month, the maximum we would be able to have as a deficit would be 500,000. So that's a significant challenge for us and requires really an immediate acceleration of our CIP position. As I've already referenced, our position from an income perspective is really very strong as a site. But again, our CIP delivery for the remainder of the financial year is really heavily reliant on continued overachievement of income, which is why the outcome of the discussions that we should have by the end of this week is really important for us in forecasting what our year-end position is going to be. And just as long with the Atri site, the pressures from an urgent care perspective and winter pressures, again, the delivery of those are going to be a particular risk for us. In terms of the mitigations, and clearly the ongoing conversations about our income position is really important, and our ability really to deliver either the ward closures by either continued reduction in our no criteria to reside, or our ability to just reduce our winter pressure costs as a result of it. They're going to be really key areas for us going forward. I haven't gone through everything on the tracker because I'm just conscious of time, and we've talked about a lot of the schemes on there already. From an escalation perspective, I did just want to highlight that the vacancy freeze that we've been obviously enforced across all of our sites, although we have had a risk-based approach to certainly progressing recruitment with some of our vacancies, we have had added to the risk register a further 2 12-level risks across 2 of our divisions that relate to the impact of that admin freeze. What I am undertaking is a review currently as a mid-year of the impact of that vacancy freeze, what the number of vacancies are that we're carrying across our site, and the impact and clinical risk that we're experiencing as a result of it. I will be feeding back my recommendations to our HMB in November, and obviously we'll be able to feed back to you next month. From an IPR perspective, we are declaring 2 risks at a 12 currently with regards to UEC performance and 1 at an 8. So our UEC performance for all types is compliant at 76.4% currently, and our type 1% position is 52%. As Aintree have reported, we have experienced an increase in both demand and ambulance conveyances, but we have been able to support a 28-minute average handover for ambulances. So again, we're maintaining a strong position there. And our average time within the department is, our average percentage of 12 hours in department is currently running at 15%. One thing I did want to highlight, which is something really positive working with our partners in Merseycare, is that we already have a co-located walk-in centre with access to a GP in ours. And with effect from the beginning of November, we've been able to establish that GP service out of hours. So we're really, optimistic as the impact that that's going to have on us helping to decongest some of our pressures within the emergency department. Our no criteria to reside is already referenced, although it is still a 12 on our risk register. Based on our current position and the improvements that we're seeing, if that continues to be sustained, we'll clearly be looking to review that going forward. Our elective position from a 65-week perspective is only scoring an 8 currently, and that's based on the strong position that we've sustained over recent months. We've had no patients over 65 weeks reported in October, and we're forecasting to continue that position into November. RTT, our position is 61.45, which is why we are still carrying a level 12 risk. Our 52-week position is a 10 risk currently, because we are delivering currently 1.04% of the 1% trajectory. So again, a strong position electively for the site. Our real area of focus continues to be our cancer performance, particularly with FDS, and you'll see that we have 2 12-level risks within our risk register. I've established a cancer improvement group with our have oversight of our improvement plans, looking at cross-site working with our diagnostic services, and along with other teams, we're looking at key areas to improve our FDS position going forward. In terms of our new risks, really, just as further escalations, as I've already referenced, we have 2 A and C risks that have gone on the risk register this month. We have a new risk that's been added with regards to the transfer of the therapy service to site specific. This is because at the point of transfer, following the workforce change, there was a gap in senior leadership for our therapies team. We're delighted to confirm that we have now appointed into that post. They start at the beginning of December, and once they're in post, we feel that the issues that we have with oversight of the financial position it will be able to be addressed with the appointment of that individual. We have a risk that's been escalated with regards to the location of our PAL service within the atrium on the Royal site. This is because of some incidents that have been reported with regards to isolated working and the violence and aggression incidents that are being reported potentially against individuals working in that area. We've worked with our estates team and we have confirmed that we have identified a new location, so we are confident that we're going to be able to de-escalate that risk going forward. The additional risk that's on there with regards to staffing pressures over on the Aintree site that's been impacting on the availability of lists for the services that we provide over on the Aintree site. Although that has been reported as a 12, I'm pleased to confirm that we are starting to see a reduction in the number of lists that are being cancelled over on the Aintree side. So again, working in partnership with the team over at Aintree, we're confident that if that reduction in our cancelled theatre lists over there continues, by next month we will be able to reduce that risk. And then the final risk is with regards to the digital interface between My Medical Records and our Somerset Cancer Database, because there has been an issue with regards to our ability to have oversight of some of our surveillance waiting lists. We're working really closely with our digital colleagues and also some cross-site working, because it does have some impact on the Aintree site as well. And we have to have some finish where we're looking at proposals going forward as to potentially other providers that would address the issue that we have with a lack of oversight of some of the surveillance that are being reported on My Medical Record. So I know that's a very high level overview, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Joanne. It's a very good overview. Well done. Points, questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas? Mike, please.
Yeah, thanks, Joanne. That was really helpful, and lots of really good stuff going on. The one thing I'm just struggling to get to is our confidence levels on the recovery of the cancer performance. So I hear the actions that are taking place. What I still can't get a handle on is, are we confident that those will deliver a recovered performance rather than a kind of improved performance, and will we hit the targets by the end of the year? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think with the engagement that we have working across site, that absolutely we will be in a much stronger position. We're already starting to see an improvement. I think the position that we've reported, although it was a deteriorated position in the month of August, that was very reflective of summer pressure, patient choice, what seasonally we tend to experience anyway during that summer period. So yes, we are confident that we are going to get back on trajectory and hit the requirement by the end of the year.
Thank you. And Sue, sorry, Jackie next, please, and then Sue.
Thanks, Joe. Really good paper. You've mentioned in here about the escalation around the medical rate card, and I'm conscious of the upcoming strike action. So I just wondered, is this going to be a real big issue for us going forward, or would that be something that comes to board next week? I'm just trying to get a flavour of whether it's going to be impactful.
So certainly with regard to the industrial action, we've got a specific industrial action rate card, so we don't foresee any issues with regard to that. And I believe whether this will go to board later, it may well be on the agenda later today, but I think there are further discussions taking place as to what potential escalation we may need to put in place where we do really have service critical situations where we have a shortfall in staffing. And I think if it's not on the agenda now, it may be late, certainly for board. I can see John's put his hand up, so I don't know, John, if that's in specific response to that question.
It is. We had a meeting earlier first thing this morning with LNC colleagues. I think it probably is, you're quite right to highlight it, Jackie, it is a potentially serious concern. The rate card was a request from the turnaround director across Cheshire and Merseyside, and it resulted in introduction of a rate card which was in place in Greater Manchester, so it's comparable. But it was a reduction on what we were offering, and this created great unhappiness, and a movement from juniors to not fill gaps. It was introduced in October, but because the gaps had been filled before October, we agreed to honour all shifts through October, and therefore we're only now, just in November, beginning to see the impact of that. And of course, clearly heading into winter, that's going to be a problem. There is a tension about the acting down policy, which is quite, it's very generous, and it also includes time off in lieu as well as significant payments. But there's also a pressure now to not act down because of the unhappiness about the rate card. There's a lot of unhappiness, and the strike is just going to compound that. We have recommended the standard industrial action rate card, which is a generous rate card, but it is not the acting down policy. The BMA are advising consultants not to accept that and to accept shifts using that. So we had a high level meeting, and Heather has taken an action from that with Pete to speak with James outside of this. But I think there are very active discussions going on. It is a significant risk. I think it's a significant concern, and it's difficult to know how it's going to pan out, but it is a concern. You're quite right to raise it. I think it's going to be something we're going to have to watch very closely.
Thanks, John.
Sue, please.
Thank you, David. I just wanted you've quite rightly focused on the risks and the performance in month 6. Just wondered, in terms of month 7 that's now passed, are there any sort of issues you want to, in terms of emerging risks, that you want to sort of highlight that we might sort of need to be aware of in terms of Royal performance?
I would just say, really, from a UEC perspective, that although we are holding our own currently, I would say that there will be some deterioration in UEC performance in response to the pressures that we're experiencing. We're still still maintaining good flow through the site. We're supporting handover 45 within the emergency department. We have got the initiatives with the GP, which again will help with our 4-hour and our 12-hour performance. But I do think it would be remiss of me if I didn't acknowledge the continued pressures that we're feeling. I'm anticipating that will be some improvements within cancer performance, and certainly within our DMO1 position as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll come back to folks waiting in the queue. But while we're on that, Joanne, the increase in demands at the emergency department that you described, is that part of an overall increase in demand across Merseyside, or is it that more people are coming to us and fewer going to other places?
So I think certainly we've seen winter hitting us earlier this year than we have done previously, and I think that's certainly across Cheshire and Mersey. But for, I think, both the Royal and Aintree sites, we are certainly seeing a higher number of attendances. For the Royal, I'm having the highest number of ambulance conveyances that I've had reported previously. We're exceeding 100, 110 a day on some occasions, when we were previously averaging 75, 80 a day. So again, really is quite significant, the increase that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to track this, James, about whether the sort of ambulances are changing their protocols about who we bring to work.
We do review it regularly, and we look at whether they're going up or down anywhere else, or whether NMOS have decided that it's easier to drop at the Royal than at somewhere else. I think, as Pete indicated earlier, we're seeing a sort of really early flu peak, and we've also seen, you may have seen in the HHA, the critical incidents that get declared in January have started to happen across the country in November. So it does feel like, and the conversation with clinicians, and as Pete said, some of the evidence in the data is there's been a very early flu peak this year, which is leads us into why we need to do better at the flu vaccine later on.
David, please.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. A very clear report. And clearly there is some progress being made, so well done to everybody. On the risk register 9196, there's the reference to the immediate withdrawal of elastomeric devices by the ICB. I've no idea what elastomeric devices are and how many patients are affected by this. So could you just explain that to me and tell me when we're hoping to have that discussion with the ICB?
This is with regards to the impact services, which is where we're able to discharge patients with IV therapy. So it will reduce the length of stay for our patients where it's clinically appropriate for us to discharge them. This was a decision that was driven quite financially by Merseycare. So they drew funding for the equipment that was required for us to be able to discharge patients into the community. So what we're in the process of doing at the moment is collating information about the impact our increased length of stay. Equally for our patients, if they are clinically fit to be discharged, the safest place for them to be is back in their home environment. So that's why once we have this data, certainly by the end of November, we will be meeting with Merseycare and having a conversation as to whether or not it's going to be reinstated.
And do you have some idea of the number of patients involved? Is it a material number?
I haven't got those exact details, David. David, I do apologise, but certainly we'll have them to discuss at board next week and to provide an update at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good report. Looking at the admin shortage in the surgery division, I see you've got sort of plans in place to recruit. It's been to know how long that will take. But is the origin of this sort of thorny problem all the time when you're trying to control vacancies, it actually impacts on patients rapidly becomes apparent. The cause really, and then what's the time frame for the solution?
So as a reference, we have had a risk-based approach. So it hasn't been a blanket vacancy freeze. So there have been some appointments that we have made. What we have seen though is as we're seeing an increased workload for the staff that we do have in post, our sickness absence rates are increasing. So that is where the risk is really escalating for us, because we're having now an increased number of leavers. So our attrition rates are going up, our sickness absent rates are going up. So we've got some real critical areas across the divisions. We try to redeploy staff across the divisions as much as we can, but we're really reaching a point now within some services where it is becoming quite service critical for us to progress and potentially some additional recruitment. I'm taking a risk-based approach. I'm going to be looking at some of the key performance metrics, looking at some of the roles and the real risk from a clinical perspective, and then we'll be taking that recommendation through HMB. I've already approved some additional bank shifts for the key areas where there is a particular risk at the moment, where we can prioritise the workload for those members of staff.
Is there something that wellbeing service could do? Because obviously I can get the sense of the pressure the staff are under, and that leads to increased absence rate and the turnover. Would there something a TLC that wellbeing could do to support them during this transitional period?
It's certainly something that perhaps we could have a discussion about offline. I think the issue that we have that's perhaps different on the Royal site is a lot of our medical secretaries, etc. We don't have a centralised booking team over here, so they are responsible for the booking of appointments. So a lot of the roles aren't things that we can actually allocate to somebody else to do. Already as much as digital dictation, typing letters, etc., just to manage the risk there. But certainly, I'd be interested to progress a conversation with you potentially with regards to that.
Yeah, I think people need to feel they're cared for, don't they, and actually deal more robustly with pressure. And maybe wellbeing could help with that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Joanne. All good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jeffrey, do you want to come back?
No, sorry, I was trying to get my hand down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, finish the site reports on a high with us, please.
Morning all. So conscious of time, I'll try and give an overview, but I'll take the paper as read. I'll just acknowledge that this was the first HMB for LHCH and Broad Green in the new structures. I think we're still getting used to the new format, but I think a good level of assurance and ability to have dialogue with the divisions as well. Start on a high in terms of the staff survey update. So we're looking through, but we're responsible for the 50% mark, and in flu uptake we're about 29%. So working through that and push that message at the beginning of HMB. In terms of inpatient survey, again, a positive story. LHH, good rankings. Broad Green, again, year-on-year improvement. So we're really looking at how do we develop that as a cultural element across the site. In terms of risks, I won't go into too much detail on the financial element, but there are two high-level risks in relation to surgery's financial position and the Broad Green position. Rob's given you our financial trajectory towards the end of the year, so we are still aiming to be on plan, but there are a number of CIP schemes that have been changed in risk rating towards month 7, so we'll be working with PwC colleagues to try and see if we can close the gap and make sure we are maintaining plan both across LHCH and the Broad Green teams. In terms of performance, if you look across the report, you'll see the LHCH we're maintaining on track for our in-year performance targets. Broad Green, for me, there's an area of deep dive focus on dermatology. That's been linked with the corporate ops team. We need to deliver an additional 155 extra clock stops between now and the end of December. At the moment, the average week wait for a dermatology appointment is 56 weeks. So not an acceptable position that we want it to be in. And for us to maintain that 52-week position, we really need to get on top of the outpatient capacity. So I'm working with the division around what are my short, medium and long-term elements to really drive that performance under where we need it to be, and then subsequently look at the RTT performance overall. In terms of quality risks, there's a risk around non-elective aortic surgery referrals. That's highlighted in the report, and that's being managed by the quality meeting in the LHCH Broad Green structure. We have got a solution to that, but it will take a little bit of time to implement based on us linking with procurement and digital colleagues to get the system in place and fit for purpose. Another risk that just probably to highlight is a people risk around the ACHD service. So colleagues who were part of the LHCH board in September, we acknowledged a external review on ACHD, a number of actions looking at the staffing within that service. We at LHCH are the level 1 service, and we provide an ACH2C service to the northwest, but the staffing is provided by Alder Hey. So a very niche service to be able to manage, and we need to get the right workforce in to deliver the capacity that we need. So that's an ongoing plan that will take a number of months, but we're able to safely manage the quality and performance targets at this stage. And as it develops, we'll raise any concerns as it needs to be through UHLG board. And then the final risk is around our estates issues. So currently we are doing mitigation work around theatre ventilations on the LHCH site. However, we know that the LHCH Theatre Suite is not fit for purpose for a longer term position. We're over 10 years of when it was originally put in place, conscious that we need to look at a refurb or total new build in that kind of conversation, and capital envelope is minimal. We're looking at what mitigations in partnership with the Broad Green site can we develop in a sustainable position. That might be around how do we connect the Broad Green theatres and build back-to-back kind of estate. But I'll put that out there as it's probably a 40 million investment, and we will need to look at commercial approaches to make sure it's financially sustainable. So those were the 6 risks across our HMB. I'm conscious of time, so there's a lot of detail within the paper, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Very concise, very clear. Points, questions for Jonathan, please. Okay. Jackie, please.
Yeah, just a little bit more if you could, Jonathan, around the Boston contract, around the pacemakers and the recalls. I'm just wondering what the consequence of that is for patients. Are they having to have them refitted again, the cost of that, and is there any areas where we can make improvements ahead of that, or do it's just about changing contracts?
So it's a 2-part. So from a patient perspective, and the recall obviously has come out of left field. We need to make sure that any patient with those pacemakers have come back in and we re-implemented or assessed of any needs. So the clinical lead for Heart Rhythm is linking with Boston around the appropriate approach, and we're hopeful we'll get a plan with the support of the supplier. In point 2, in terms of the contract, our overall contract supported commercial investment over the last 7 years and supported the developments of our cath labs. There's a year-on-year commitment to spend with companies, but within the contract there are elements that obviously things that were out of our control need to be supplemented by the supplier. For me, there's a 2-part conversation about year 6 and year 7, because that's a 7-year contract, of how we manage it if we are having continued issues with pacemakers, and with all these contracts it's clinically led. So current meetings ongoing as we look to end year 5 with a understanding that we need a plan going into year 6 and year 7, and if it becomes a significant risk, I'll raise it back.
Thank you, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan, we've discussed previously the impact of the known unknowns around what's happening in Wales. Can you just update us on where we're at, please?
So, in the month 6 decision, we were back on plan. However, that doesn't mitigate for month 1 to month 5. Our assumption in our financial plan is that we will recover the Wales position in month 7 to month 12. Obviously, in the slides that Rob presented earlier, that is part of our financial risk, along with a couple of other elements. So the Healthy Lung Programme and making sure uptake is aligned with plan. However, that is a new screening programme that we're unaware of what the uptake is, because we're the first in the country to move to a full screening programme. The Wales income, as we've mentioned, and in and around the CIP delivery as well.
Thank you. Any final points, John? Okay, thank you. Well done. Right, looking at the rest of the agenda, James, I think we just said we'll wrap up the corporate risks, the winter plan, and the vaccination programme in one bit of the discussion. I'll come back if there's anything in the IPRs that we haven't covered already that any members of the committee want to raise, but let's go through that cluster of items first, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So corporate risks, fairly straightforward today. The paper is self-explanatory. You can see what's included. We've got a finance risk that remains, and the safeguarding risk remains, but is continuing to progress. The key ones that were on the agenda this time were around the extra contractual rate, which we already talked about, and the EPR, which Max has got plans to mitigate. We're just working through the detail on that now. So nothing I think that's significant that we need to consider there that isn't already been discussed, they already highlighted to the board, for the EPR, which Max is working on. We expect that to reduce by next time. Okay, can we just move on? So on the winter plan, we've got a paper that's coming to the senior management board, which is all the divisions, the sites and the group execs next week. I just wanted to give you the headlines of that, so board is still in touch with where we were. So the last meeting we talked about, we had keeping the numbers really simplistic, we had a 2 million provision this year for winter. We expected the cost to hit somewhere around 5. The reason was we were told not to put any provision in by commissioners at the beginning of the year, but we did. We put 2 in, and so we were 3 short. We were negotiating with commissioners to redistribute other funding that isn't as critical. And as I said earlier, they've highlighted 1.5. Doesn't mean we've got it, but they've highlighted where they could get 1.5. So we're still working through that. So in terms of risk and what we need to be cited on as a board, we agreed at the last meeting that 1.6 million should be deployed immediately. Corridor care and putting in a cheaper rate than doing it in emergency, both through the Royal and for point of care testing, because that was critical to manage the front door situation. Both of those have been put in place. We estimated 1.6 million for those. The forecast is that that'll be 1.45. The reason being that the point of care testing is coming cheaper than we thought it would. So that's good. They're all in place. We then said, okay, we need about another 3 million. We've worked through the beds that can open on each of the sites. We're clear on all of those 3. So at Aintree, that's about 1.47 million of beds. The Royal about 0.7, and at Broad Green about 0.6. The Royal ones are open already. Broad Green are planned for January onwards, and Aintrees are planned for November onwards. So the total bed cost would be about 2.7 of the residuals. So we've put those things in place, but again, making sure that those things are done through the cheapest available rate by pre-booking things and getting bank in place and so on. And then the other schemes that we had on the list that were really the sort of extra consultants at peak winter periods, the Christmas type stuff, New Year type stuff, had a total value of 1.3 million. That's been scheduled for December to March. So we've got it planned. We've got bookings of locums planned. All of those things can be removed should we be in a position where that becomes unaffordable or unavoidable, or let's hope a better position on beds and winter pressures arises. So we'll take the paper through the senior management board on Tuesday, and then it'll work its way back through the board. But largely the total sort of £5 million cost, we're estimating, if you did everything, at 5.45. There's decisions we can make around some of that capacity to start it later in December to even that out and keep it within the threshold. The risk at the moment is we haven't incurred any costs beyond what's in our provision already, but we've got plans in place. Opening some already. Ones that are already open can be mitigated by some of the provision, but we really need urgent sort of situation resolving on how much of the 3 million winter funding we're going to be able to get our hands on. But for now, I think the board can be assured we're not currently incurring any expense we haven't agreed. But we've got to continue to push for the expenditure to match the rest. But all the plans are in place to do that. So once that paper that explains all of that's been through senior management board and tested with the sites, we'll bring that to the board when we meet next, so everybody's got full visibility of those plans. And then just quickly on to flu, because obviously a key part of the winter plan. We are, as the paper says, performing against our trajectory, which is good. Some concern that we have a bit of a slow start when we benchmark ourselves with other organisations. Lots of actions are taking place that we touched on already today, roving teams, other things that we've added to try and improve the uptake. I think it's fair to say that whilst we're on our trajectory, the trajectory is pretty weedy. That isn't our choice. That was the sort of, we matched what we were asked to nationally. I think nationally there was an acceptance that the target wasn't really that challenging. It's 5% better than last year, when last year wasn't very good. So we are looking at how much further we can go down that trajectory. So as I say, there's been a lot of additional inputs over the last few weeks, and our uptake has increased significantly as a result. So I think it's one for us to take into consideration when we next meet and just see what progress has been made on that. But all of the sites are doing extra to try and push that forward, particularly given the amount of flu that we've seen coming through the front door as well. So with stuff all in the right place, financially not incurred any costs we haven't previously agreed, costs coming down the line, indicative support for those costs, but we haven't received it yet. So it's a bit like everything in this next couple of weeks, we should get better visibility on how much of that we can spend the cost for. And that ties back to each of the sites' plans that say, I'm going to be off track on my CIP because the beds have opened. If we get some of that winter money, then we're back on track with mitigations. So hopefully we'll be able to show you more of that detail in the next couple of weeks as we get to the clearer understanding of where everything is and what's funded and what's not. So I'll take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, David. Jeffrey first, please, then David.
Thanks, James. On the flu campaign, would it be useful to have the staff governors part of the communications to promote vaccination? Obviously, you're seeing an increase in attendance through the doors of the flu. And my second point, I don't know if you're funded for this, is to offer the flu vaccine to outpatients, particularly in respiratory clinics.
Yeah, so there's two things there. David may want to come in, but on the governors, absolutely we can do that. We have pushed some additional communications out already in the last couple of weeks just to try and push that message through, but that's a good suggestion we could do with governors, and we'll certainly pick that up. On the outpatients, I know there was always a traditional issue with flu that was about who's funded to do what.
I know.
So as Jim reported previously, we are able to do inpatients, but I don't know, David, do you know about the outpatients? Is that something we can do?
Excuse me, I don't believe that we have the ability to be funded for the outpatients. That might change as the situation goes on, but at the moment I don't believe that's the case. With regard to the campaign, Jeffrey, obviously that would be helpful with the governors. There has been there's going to be a campaign launched by the ICB for both patients, the communities, and for hospital staff, and that information is just coming through now. That's going to be launched next week.
The final point on that is, I assume we've all been vaccinated for flu at the board. Could we get that as a message? You know, we're role modelling that we've all been vaccinated.
It's an interesting one that I asked the execs. I'm not supposed to ask anybody whether they've been vaccinated or not because it's a personal choice, but I asked them anyway, and it turned out everybody had apart from me, so I'm going to have to fess up to that one and get the line quickly. Yeah, David's just moving away from here. So we will. If people are happy to share that, then we certainly could share. Or it might be easier just to do individual sort of promotional, I've had my vaccination, if you've had yours type stuff, so we can do some of that as well.
When I was at MWL, we did do that. When I was at MWL, we did do that. So we had photographs of us being vaccinated. And on our lanyards, we had a sticker saying, I've been vaccinated.
Well, I've still got last year's on my lanyard, so I'm all right. Yeah, I think
just a thought.
The key thing, what we know from our data and evidence is the key thing that makes the difference is taking the needle to where somebody's working rather than expecting them to stop working and go somewhere else. So that's really where we're prioritising the effort at the moment.
Thanks, James.
Peter, do you want to come on this before I go?
Yeah, just really briefly. I think David's answered it, but just on the promotional stuff, if you look at your screensavers, you'll see me having mine, Jeffrey. So so everyone in the organisation knows I've had mine, and I think it's all over social media. Positively, I suppose. But from a chest clinic point of view, it's a really good point. But unfortunately, we're not funded. I was down there yesterday. We're not able to do it. But all the chest physicians, I can reassure you, are telling all their patients that they need to get the flu jab. I had a conversation with 10 people yesterday about that, really, to say you really need this. It is the point I was making earlier. The prevalence in the community is going through the roof. But as David also said, and Jim has reported, we can do it for inpatients, which is a positive thing, I think. So we are picking some patients up.
David on this, please. David Neely.
Yeah, and just to really confirm that obviously pregnant women are being offered flu jabs through their outpatients and any contact with their midwife throughout the whole of their pregnancy.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, colleagues. David Gilbert.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And in the interest of transparency, I've had my flu jab and I have it every year for as long as I can remember. I was surprised earlier in the week when I had to log on to my Luft ESR to see that keeps a record of your organisation and the current status of flu jabs. And at the 3rd of November, Luft were at 26.4%. But it gives you the detail of the staff groups that have had the vaccination. And David, nurses are at the bottom of the list, as for some inexplicable reason they always are. But there does seem to be a correlation between the staff who haven't had their jab and the staff groups on James's report that have high levels of sickness. Now, I'm colourblind, so I can't tell you that the correlation is statistically significant, but there does seem to be a real link between if you have the flu jab, you don't have so much time off sick. And I just wondered if there's a way we could play that into the discussion when the numbers have been checked.
David.
So thank you, David. So part of the whole campaign that's been coming out next week is it recognises that for a lot of frontline staff, they don't take their flu injections early because they want to ensure that they're covered for over Christmas. And so people will delay it. It's a reason people do it, and also often people won't have their flu vaccination until they start seeing people who are poorly. And that's a general population issue as well. So there is some very, very common trends, which is why a lot of the publicity now is around when the peak's going to be, and the peak is likely to be over Christmas and New Year, or the first peak anyway. And then to make sure you're safe, get your injections now.
Thank you. Jeffrey, did you want to come back?
Apologies, time to my hand down, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, all clear. When do we expect the funding issues on the winter plan to be resolved?
Well, it's back to the same issue, isn't it? These are all things that are stacking up on that list from yesterday's meeting that unless we've got clarity about them, we can't give an accurate forecast. So yeah, we need to know this in this next, well, certainly in this next 2-week period, because that's when we've got to present it.
Rob?
Yeah, just to follow on that, I had a call with them this morning, early doors, following up, mention this again, the overperformance they're hopefully going to get back to us tomorrow. The winter one, they've pushed back a week or so. So they said end of next week, but working on it.
Yeah, fantastic. Peter?
Briefly, check my diary. There's a meeting on the 18th of November in my diary about the winter, which is way too late, isn't it? So we probably need to advance that.
Yeah. I listened to an item on the radio driving in this morning. It's in the context of the Justice Secretary and people being let out of prisons and all of that. The political journalists refer to unaccountable numbers running public services. I've pulled over to reflect on that statement. Take personal responsibility for that. But we just need, in a situation like this, you just need other organisations to be able to be decisive and step up. All the risk is just left at the provider end of the system. Okay, thank you. Now, do I need to pick up anything else in integrated performance report or operational plan metrics?
Just Beth's agenda item on the operational plan. I think she's got 2 or 3 slides just to tell us what the key metrics are that we need to be concerned about now and next year, and then I think that's the agenda done.
Thank you. Beth, please.
Thank you, Chair. I like a challenge, so I've got basically a couple of minutes, so I will try and get through this as quickly as possible. Hopefully you can see the slides now. So the medium-term operational planning guidance was published on the 24th of October. The aim is to deliver improved waiting times, access for people, to remove bureaucracy, redirect money and resource to frontline services. It also aims to drive the strategic shifts set out in the 10-year plan. And so you will see today, from what I'm going to share with you, there are certain targets that are going to change around cancer, urgent care, and also elective waiting times. What you'll see in front of you, and these 2 slides will be shared for people, you will see that there are 4 areas: elective, UEC, diagnostic and cancer. We've identified what metrics are in the PAF, because I know that Jackie has asked for that previously. So there are some in the PAF, and just as a reminder what the PAF is, the Performance Assessment Framework is what the NHSE use to measure and assess performance across NHS providers and ICBs, and that's what forms segmentation. You will also see a column saying IPR. We also wanted to provide assurance that what you are seeing has board oversight, because all of the metrics are currently in the IPR. The next column is around the 25-26 planning objectives. These are this year's targets. So I will go through that in a minute. And then in terms of the 26-27, what we will expect to see change. So you will see for the 2 elective targets, the 52 weeks and the focus on the 67% of patients seen in 18 weeks, they will no longer be a focus in 26-27, and it will just be on the 18-week pathway. For UEC, the 2 targets remain, but they are more ambitious, the targets. For diagnostics, we don't know what that is yet. We're waiting for further guidance. And for cancer, 3 will remain, FDS will remain as is, and 2 are requiring further improvement. Final slide just shows, first column is our performance as at September. So you will see the top left 55.97. So it just, that column is about our September performance. The next column provides you with the end of year expected target. And then I've put in a column telling you how close we are away from that end of year target in March 26. And you will see that we already are seeing a challenged position across the metrics for this current year. And then you will see the proposed change in those targets in the next column. And you will see that on top of, for example, the elective target, we are 4% away at Luft on achieving that elective target. They will be expecting a 7% further improvement next year. For UEC, on people 12 hours in the department, it's already challenged for us to achieve this year, and they'll expect a further 1% improvement. And for the 4-hour target, they will be expecting not only us to deliver the 78% by March, another 4%. For the women's, it remains the same for elective, but you will see that they are quite much further away from the end of year, i.e. March 26 target. So theirs is even more significant, the expected improvement. And again, for cancer, we see at the women's, it's already challenged, but just so Jenny knows, we have to wait to see whether there will be some negotiation, knowing that there is quite a stretch for us to get to of whether they will allow us to negotiate local targets. But I was asked to share with you, what does this mean for us and for next year? I think that's what I've done in this summary, but I will stop there, Chair, and I will leave some time for questions, but I will also ask Sarah Duffy to share these 2 slides with you, and I'm quite happy for anybody to contact me and I'll go through this in more detail for them. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that it was very clear what you put up. You'd leave that slide that's up now on, please. So all these improves, it's clearly very challenging and big step ups, but all matter for patients in that sense. I don't think we'd argue any of these things. One of the things I couldn't work out, Beth, and maybe I didn't read the document closely enough, is when they say this is the target we need to get to by a date, does that mean it's the last day of the year or the last week of the year or the last month of the year or the last quarter of the year? Is it clear when you need to get to these things right? Because they're not whole year average performance, are they?
Well,
get to the point at the end.
So interestingly, we had this conversation as a team yesterday because we're just trying to work through, and actually some of the targets are an average over the year. They are discouraging. So I think it was around particularly UEC. They are discouraging. Let's put the foot down in Q4, like you've just said. So actually, some of them do make reference to the average across the year, and that's the level of detail that we're just going through now as a team.
Okay, so all this hits us from day one of the new year?
Yes.
Not all of it. No, I mean, some are, some aren't. So you can see in some of them, there's a very specific, so for example, the 62-day cancer, 80% won't be full year, 80% performance.
Yes.
It'll be the latest quarter of the year or the latest month of the year. So what we've had is the high level, as Beth said, we're still working through the detail. This was really to give a bit of a heads up to the board about, in a positive way, for the first time that I can remember, we sort of know what the targets are for next year well ahead of Christmas. So we should get ahead of this now in planning terms. The most important use of this information now is to get the planning right, so that we get for all 3 organisations a consistent view of activity, performance and workforce aligned to these. Whereas, as you'll remember, in last year, we were still sort of stumbling into May, June, unclear what all the standards were and what you had to hit.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, this gives us a fighting chance of doing a better planning round and a more consistent planning round that the board can interrogate ahead of time. So, as Beth said, we'll send the slides around for information. A lot of this is new information in the last week or so, but it's important we now get cracking with the planning ask of what would that take, as Jenny said before, what step change will be required in Gynae next year to get to that, because there'll be a workforce element in that, I'm sure.
Okay, any other points on this, please?
Yeah.
Okay, good, very clear. Know what we've got to do, where we're heading. An early notification to enable a longer plan. Yeah, all very welcome. Are there any items of any other business anyone wishes to raise? Yes, David.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of the time, so just a yes or no answer, please. Have we had a reply to the letter that you sent to Louise about, was it the section 118 licence?
111, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Chief Executive's got a meeting with the Regional Director this afternoon. I'm sure it'll be resolved in the course of that discussion. Any other points, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good discussion, good meeting, good papers, good presentations, good questions, good challenge. Thank you all very much. And I'll close this meeting now, and then we'll take a 90-second. I know 1 or 2 non-executive directors need to ring the stockbrokers before 12:30. If we could have the a 2-minute break before we reconvene to consider single board item. Thank you. Thanks very much.
I'll have to make sure I am up by 12:30.
Yeah, we need to be able to go to this.
I've got Louise at 12:30.
Have you?
Yeah, you know what I
She's in
said?
here.
No, it's on the, it's on Teams.